The morning began like any other, wrapped in the soft gold of early sunlight that spilled across the open-air market in the heart of the city. Wooden stalls lined the street in uneven rows, their awnings fluttering gently as vendors set out crates of fresh fruit, jars of honey, handmade jewelry, and steaming trays of breakfast food. The air carried a mix of roasted coffee, warm bread, and the faint hum of conversation, ordinary, comforting, alive. Among the crowd walked a man few recognized at first glance. He wore simple jeans, worn boots, and a dark jacket zipped halfway up, his hands tucked casually into the pockets. His hair fell loosely around his face, slightly unkempt, as if he hadn't bothered with a mirror that morning. There was nothing flashy about him, nothing that demanded attention. That was how he preferred it. Keanu Reeves moved slowly through the market, pausing now and then to examine a stall or exchange a polite nod with a vendor. He bought a cup of coffee from a small stand, run by an elderly man who smiled. Without realizing who his customer was, Keanu thanked him sincerely, the way he always did, and stood to the side, watching the rhythm of normal life unfold around him. Children laughed as they chased one another between stalls. A street musician tuned his guitar, plucking a few tentative notes that echoed softly against nearby buildings. Somewhere, a radio played an old song, barely audible beneath the noise of the crowd. It was the kind of morning that felt untouched by the world's larger chaos, a small pocket of peace. Keanu liked places like this. Markets didn't care about fame or headlines. Here, people were just people. He leaned slightly against a post, sipping his coffee, his thoughts drifting. He was between projects, enjoying the rare luxury of time with no strict schedule. The anonymity, even if temporary, felt refreshing. A woman passing by glanced at him twice, her brow furrowing as recognition flickered and then faded. Keanu offered a small, polite smile, and she smiled back, unsure why she suddenly felt warmer. He continued walking, stopping at nothing felt unusual yet. At the far end of the market, the sound of engines grew louder, just enough to register at the edge of awareness. A few vendors looked up, shielding their eyes from the sun. Keanu didn't notice at first. He was listening to the musician now, the gentle melody stirring something nostalgic inside him. Then the music stopped. A sudden hush rippled through the crowd. Subtle but unmistakable, like a held breath. Somewhere nearby, a radio crackled and went silent. Keanu looked up, sensing the shift. His calm expression unchanged, but his instincts quietly alert. In that moment, with the sun still warm on his face and the market frozen between seconds, the ordinary morning reached its end. Though no one yet understood how completely everything was about to change. The first siren cut through the morning air like a blade. Heads turned almost in unison as the distant wail grew louder, sharper, multiplying until it echoed between the buildings surrounding the market. Conversations faltered. A vendor froze mid-gesture, a paper bag dangling from his hand. Somewhere, a child stopped laughing. Keanu straightened slightly, his eyes scanning the street beyond the stalls. Black vehicles rolled into view at the market's entrance in marked SUVs, their dark windows reflecting the sunlight. They moved with deliberate precision, blocking exits one by one. The engines shut off almost simultaneously, an unsettling silence following in their wake. Doors opened. Men and women stepped out, dressed in dark jackets, earpieces curling behind their ears. Badges flashing briefly before disappearing again beneath fabric. Their posture alone set them apart, alert, controlled, purposeful. This was not a routine police presence. This was something heavier. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Keanu felt it then, that subtle tightening in the atmosphere. The instinctive awareness that something was wrong. He took a step back, blending instinctively into the flow of people. Though he didn't run. Running implied guilt. He had none. Federal officers. A voice called out, amplified but calm. Please remain where you are. The market erupted into nervous motion. Some people raised their hands. Others instinctively reached for their phones. Vendors shouted questions that went unanswered. The agents moved quickly, fanning out. Their eyes scanning faces with unsettling focus. Then the voice came again, closer this time. Keanu Reeves. The name landed like a dropped glass. For a fraction of a second, Keanu wondered if he had imagined it. But the sudden shift in attack way several agents turned directly toward him. The impossible. Conversations died. Cameras lifted higher. Someone gasped audibly. Keanu didn't move. An agent approached, hand resting near his belt, expression unreadable. "Sir," he said firmly, "please step forward." Keanu exhaled slowly and did as instructed. The crowd parted instinctively, forming a narrow corridor of stunned faces. Whispers spread like wildfire. "That's him, no way. Is this real?" Keanu stopped a few feet from the agents. "What's this about?" he asked calmly, voice carried. The agent hesitated just long enough to make the moment heavier. "You are suspected of involvement in illegal market manipulation, identity-linked financial operations, and classified data interference." "This is a mistake," he said quietly. "Sir," the agent replied, guiding him forward. "You'll have the opportunity to explain everything." As Keanu was led away through the heart of the market, the place that had felt so ordinary just minutes earlier transformed into a stage of shock and confusion. The morning sun still shone. The stalls still stood. But nothing about the day or his life would ever feel normal again. The moment Keanu Reeves was led forward in handcuffs, the market ceased to be a place of trade and chatter and became something else, entirely a living, breathing spectacle of disbelief. The silence that followed his arrest lasted only a second before breaking apart into chaos. Phones rose everywhere. Dozens of people began recording, their screens glowing as they zoomed in on the unbelievable scene unfolding before them. Hands trembled, voices shook. Someone shouted, "That's Keanu Reeves," as if saying it louder might somehow make it less impossible. Another voice answered, "This has to be fake," but there was no laughter to follow, only confusion. Keanu felt the weight of hundreds of eyes pressing in on him from all directions. He had been on red carpets, in packed theaters, under flashing cameras, but this was different. There was no script, no controlled environment, no understanding of what came next. Still, his posture remained steady. He walked calmly, guided by the firm grip of an agent's hand on his arm, refusing to let panic take control. A young woman near a fruit stand covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "He's such a good person," she whispered to no one in particular. An older man shook his head slowly, muttering that the world had finally lost its mind. A vendor shouted angrily at the agents, demanding answers, but was quickly silenced by a warning glance. Keanu caught fragments of sound as he passed his name. Questions, disbelief, outrage. He avoided eye contact at first, then stopped. For just a moment, he turned his head and looked at the crowd. The cameras captured it instantly. There was no anger in his face, no fear. Just a quiet, searching look, as if he were trying to reassure them, as much as himself. That single glance would later be replayed millions of times. Slowed down, analyzed, turned into headlines, and hashed. At that moment, it was simply human. "Why are you doing this?" Someone yelled. "Is he innocent?" Another voice cried. The agents did not respond. Their formation tightened as they guided Keanu through the narrow space between stalls. The street musician stood frozen, guitar hanging uselessly from its strap. The melody from earlier felt like a memory. A child tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Taking him?" she asked innocently. Everyone was watching history happen, even if no one understood it yet. Keanu was gently but firmly placed beside one of the SUVs. An agent opened the door. Before stepping inside, he paused again, scanning the crowd one last time. He saw fear, anger, heartbreak, but also belief. People who trusted him without knowing why. That trust settled heavily on his shoulders as he ducked into the vehicle. The door closed with a solid thud. The engine started. And as the SUVs pulled away, leaving behind a stunned and silent market, one truth became clear to everyone watching. Whatever this was, it was far bigger than an arrest, and the world would never stop watching until the truth came out. Beneath a federal building, concrete walls swallowed the sound of the city as the SUVs rolled to a stop. Keanu was guided out, the handcuffs still firm around his wrists, and escorted through a series of locked doors that opened and closed with mechanical finality. Inside a stark briefing room, fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. The air smelled faintly of metal and disinfectant. Keanu was seated at a long table, his cuffs removed, but his freedom still clearly restricted. Two agents remained by the door, silent and watchful. Moments later, three officials entered, serious faces, tailored suits, expressions trained to reveal nothing. One of them placed a thick folder on the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "This," the official said, sliding the folder forward, "is why you were detained." Keanu looked at it without touching it. "I still don't understand what you think I've done," he said evenly. The official opened the folder. Inside were photographs, transaction logs, satellite images, and printouts of encrypted communications. Screens on the wall flickered to life, displaying graphs and strings of code that meant nothing at first glance. But their complexity alone was intimidating. "These records show repeated financial operations tied to your identity," the agent continued. "Shell accounts, market disruptions, digital signatures linked to biometric confirmations." Keanu leaned forward now, confusion tightening his features. "That's impossible." An agent tapped a tablet, enlarging an image. A security camera still of a man entering a private exchange building. The resemblance was uncanny. Same height, same posture, same face. "That's not me," Keanu said immediately. "I've never been there." "According to travel logs, you were," the official replied calmly. Another file appeared: passport scans, time stamps, facial recognition matches. Each piece of evidence stacked neatly on the next, building a story that painted him as someone he did not recognize. The precision of it all was what disturbed him most. This wasn't sloppy. This was engineered. Operation involving global market influence, identity laundering, and the use of public figures as untraceable fronts. Keanu's jaw tightened. "You're telling me someone is using my face, my name, my life, to hide something like this?" The official met his gaze. We believe your identity was either compromised or willingly involved. As the officials gathered their files and prepared to leave, one of them paused. Until this investigation concludes, he said, you are not free to leave. The door closed behind them. Left alone in the cold light of the room, Keanu stared at the false reflection of himself on the darkened screen. Somewhere, someone had built a perfect shadow wearing his face, and now the world was ready to believe it. By the time Keanu Reeves was moved deeper into federal custody, the story had already escaped the walls of the building. It spread across the country at the speed of outrage, leaping from phones to televisions, from private messages to global headlines. What had begun as a few shaky videos from a market became a full-blown media storm. Breaking news banners flooded every major network. Footage looped endlessly, Keanu in handcuffs, his calm expression frozen in time as agents led him away. Anchors struggled to sound composed, while reporting details that made little sense even as they spoke them aloud. Pundits filled panels, speculating, arguing, contradicting one another in real time. Social media ignited. Hashtags trended within minutes. Some declared his innocence with unwavering certainty. Others demanded answers, digging through his past, analyzing interviews, films, charitable acts, desperately for clues that might explain the impossible. Memes appeared alongside serious threads, confusion blurring the line between disbelief and entertainment. Keanu Reeves arrested dominated every feed. Fans gathered outside federal buildings, holding handmade signs, "We believe you. This is a setup, truth matters." Candlelight vigils appeared in cities that had nothing to do with the arrest, fueled by a collective sense that something deeply wrong had occurred. Inside newsrooms, editors pushed for angles. Some outlets focused on the shock value Hollywood's nicest man. Others leaned into darker narratives, hinting at secrets and hidden lives. A few cautious voices urged restraint, reminding viewers that evidence had been presented, even if it hadn't yet been shown publicly. Former co-stars released brief statements expressing support and confusion. Directors declined to comment. Studios quietly froze projects, waiting to see which way public opinion would tilt. Inside his holding room, Keanu was allowed limited access to a muted television. He watched silently as strangers debated his character like a fictional role. It felt surreal seeing his own life reduced to captions and crawl text. What we know so far. One anchor began, before immediately admitting that almost nothing was clear. Explanation only deepened the mystery. Keanu turned the screen off. The noise was overwhelming, but beneath it, he sensed something else: a growing unease. Too many contradictions. Too many pieces that didn't quite fit. This wasn't just scandal. It was strategy. Outside, protesters grew louder. Supporters demanded transparency. Critics demanded prosecution. The country seemed split, not on guilt or innocence, but on trust in systems, in evidence, in the idea that reputation could still mean something. As night fell, the market where it all began stood empty, taped off and guarded, now a symbol broadcast across the world. And somewhere deep within a secured building, Keanu Reeves sat alone, understanding one chilling truth. The interrogation room was colder than the holding area, both in temperature and intent. Bare concrete walls closed in tightly, their pale color drained of warmth by a single overhead light that cast sharp shadows across the metal table. The door shut behind Keanu with a soft but final click, sealing him inside a space designed to strip comfort from thought. He sat down slowly, folding his hands on the table. The chair felt deliberately uncomfortable, its straight back offering no support. Minutes passed in silence, an intentional tactic. Keanu focused on his breathing, steady and controlled, refusing to let the emptiness unsettle him. The door opened. 2 interrogators entered. 1 male, 1 female, both carrying slim folders and wearing expressions practiced through years of questioning. They sat across from him, not too close, not too far. "Mr. Reeves," the woman began calmly, "this is your opportunity to clarify things." Keanu nodded. "I've been trying to do that since the market." The man slid a photograph toward him. It showed a private exchange floor, monitors glowing, traders mid-motion. In the corner of the image stood a man, his face unmistakably Keanu's. "I've never been there," Keanu said, without hesitation. "Yet the biometric confirmation says otherwise," the interrogator replied. "Facial recognition, gait analysis, voice-matched authorization." Keanu studied the image carefully. "Technology can be fooled," he said. "People can't always be." The woman leaned forward slightly. "Then help us understand who would want to do this." "That's what I want to know," Keanu replied. "Because whoever it is knows me. My movements, my habits. They know how I stand, how I walk." The interrogators exchanged a brief glance. They questioned him for hours about his travels, his finances, people he trusted. Events from years ago that seemed irrelevant, until patterns slowly emerged. Keanu answered everything honestly. He had nothing to hide, and he knew it. Still, doubt hung in the air. Not because of his words, but because of the evidence waiting outside the room. At one point, the man shut his folder and spoke more quietly. "You understand how this looks?" "I do," Keanu replied. "That's what scares me." A new screen flickered on. Audio played, his voice, clear as day, authorizing a transaction worth millions. The words were familiar. Too familiar. The woman studied him carefully, her expression shifting not to sympathy, but to consideration. When the session ended, the interrogators stood. "We're going to verify certain timelines," she said. "Until then, you remain in custody." As they left, the man paused. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "this feels constructed." The door closed again. Alone once more, Keanu stared at the reflection in the polished table surface. It stared back, calm, tired, resolute. Somewhere beyond these walls, the truth existed. He didn't yet know how to reach it. But he knew one thing for certain. Keanu didn't know how much time had passed when the door opened again. There was no warning knock this time, no deliberate pause meant to unsettle him. The change alone was enough to lift his gaze. A single man stepped inside. He was in his late 40s, dressed plainly in a dark coat and open-collared shirt, with eyes that carried the quiet weight of experience. He didn't look like an agent, no badge on display, no rigid posture, but there was an unmistakable confidence in the way he moved, as if he belonged wherever he stood. The agents behind him remained at the door. "Mr. Reeves," the man said, extending a hand. "My name is Daniel Cross." Keanu stood and shook it. The handshake was firm, familiar. Something about the man felt grounding. "We've met before," Daniel added, lowering his voice slightly. "Rome. About 6 years ago. A charity gala. You helped fund the program I was working on." Keanu searched his memory and, Then it clicked. Intelligence analysis, he said quietly. Daniel gave a faint smile. Former. Very former. They sat across from each other. The agents closed the door, leaving them alone. I'm not here officially, Daniel said. I asked for this meeting after reviewing the preliminary files. Off the record. Keanu leaned forward. Then tell me you see it too. I do, Daniel replied without hesitation. This case is too clean. Too perfect. Real criminals leave chaos. This is architecture. Daniel pulled a small drive from his pocket and placed it on the table. I can't give this to you, he said carefully. But I can tell you what's on it. Keanu listened intently. There's a pattern of identity hijacking, Daniel continued. Not just you. Public figures, with high trust ratings. Faces no one questions. Voices no one doubts. You're not the first, but you're the biggest. Who's behind it? Keanu asked. Daniel shook his head. That's the problem. The system hides itself behind legitimate agencies, contractors, and shell operations. You don't attack it directly, you expose the seams. Keanu absorbed this, his expression steady but intense. Then how do we start? Daniel met his gaze. By proving you were in two places at once. He explained quickly time-stamp discrepancies. A narrow window where Keanu had been publicly documented. In one location, while the system claimed he authorized transactions elsewhere. It was thin, fragile but real. Inside him not relief, but direction. Daniel stood. I can't protect you from the process, he said. But I can make sure the truth doesn't disappear. Before leaving, he paused. You've spent your life playing heroes, he said quietly. This time, you don't get a script. Keanu nodded. I never needed one. The door closed behind Daniel. Left alone again, Keanu looked down at his hands, no cuffs this time. But still confined. Yet the room felt different now, smaller, less final. Somewhere in the machinery that had trapped him, a crack had formed. And through that crack, the truth was beginning to breathe. The breakthrough didn't arrive with alarms or dramatic announcements. It came quietly, hidden inside a routine system audit that Daniel Cross had insisted on accelerating. Deep within layers of encrypted records. Something finally failed to line up, not in Keanu's timeline, but in the system that claimed to track it. A single discrepancy. At first, it looked insignificant. A server authorization, routed through a subcontractor, that technically shouldn't have had clearance. But when analysts pulled at that loose thread, the fabric around it began to tear. Keanu sat in a secure observation room, as new faces replaced the old interrogators. The tone had shifted. Questions became more precise, less accusatory, more careful. On a screen in front of him, data flowed, maps, timestamps, network pathways. Daniel stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching quietly. What you're seeing, one analyst explained, is an identity laundering framework. Keanu frowned. Laundering. They take something clean, the analyst continued, and pass illegal operations through it until no one questions the source. Your identity wasn't used randomly, it was selected. Another image appeared, a web of names, corporations, and digital avatars. Some were executives. Some were shell companies. Some didn't exist at all. This group doesn't call itself anything, Daniel added. But internally, analysts refer to it as the mirror network. The name fit too well. They learned how it worked. Advanced biometric replicas, built from years of public footage. Voice models trained on interviews. Movement profiles mapped from red carpets, film scenes, candid moments. Every public appearance had been harvested, refined, weaponized. Keanu felt a cold realization settle in. They turned visibility into vulnerability. Yes, the analyst said, and trust into cover. The real shock came with the final reveal. A senior compliance officer, someone tasked with safeguarding identity verification protocols, been quietly rerouting confirmations. Not acting alone, but enabling the network from inside. Every false confirmation carried legitimate signatures. Every illegal action wore official approval. Delayed. Once the internal seal broke, others followed: emails, recordings, internal warnings that had been ignored or buried to protect reputations and markets. Keanu watched it unfold with a strange mix of anger and clarity. This was never about him as a person, Keanu, but for those who had built the mirror and hidden behind it. The case pivoted sharply, like a massive structure, finally forced to acknowledge its own imbalance. As officials left the room to begin damage control, Daniel lingered. "This doesn't end with your release," he warned. "Once people learn how this worked, trust in everything will shake." Keanu nodded. "Then it needs to..." He looked at the screen one last time as the network diagram faded to black. The shadow wearing his face had been exposed. The shift in public opinion didn't happen. Slowly it snapped into place, like a lock finally turning. A single leaked document appeared first, then another. And then an entire chain of verified reports followed. By morning, the narrative that had once trapped Keanu began to collapse under the weight of truth. News banners changed tone. New evidence emerges replaced breaking news. Arrest called into question. Inside the Mirror network, analysts who had once speculated about Keanu's guilt now spoke carefully, even defensively, as if trying to outrun their earlier certainty. Video clips resurfaced this time, showing timeline contradictions, expert breakdowns of biometric forgery, and whistleblower testimony confirming internal manipulation. Social media flipped almost overnight. The same platforms that had debated his innocence now unified around it. Hashtags demanding his release surged past previous records. Long threads detailed how the system had failed, and how easily anyone could have been next. Outside the federal building, the crowd doubled. Supporters returned not with confusion, but with conviction. Signs read, "We were right, truth matters. Free Keanu." The atmosphere wasn't celebratory, it was resolute. This was no longer about one man. It was about accountability. Inside, officials scrambled. Press offices released carefully worded statements, acknowledging procedural concerns. Investigations expanded. Names were quietly removed from directories. Phones rang without pause as agencies tried to contain damage that could no longer be contained. Keanu watched from a secure room as live footage showed the same market where it all began now filled with people standing shoulder to shoulder. Vendors had reopened their stalls, not to sell, but to bear witness. Candles lined the sidewalks. Someone played a guitar, the melody slow and steady, carrying through the air like a promise kept. A legal representative entered the room, barely containing a smile. "The detention order has been suspended," she said, "pending formal clearance." Keanu exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing for the first time in days. But he didn't smile, not. Daniel Cross joined him moments later, "You've been cleared in the court of public truth," he said. As cameras gathered outside, Keanu was asked if he wanted to make a statement. He considered it carefully. When he finally stepped into the light, the crowd fell silent. Microphones stretched toward him. Cameras flashed. "I was never afraid of being accused," Keanu said calmly. "I was afraid of a world where evidence matters more than truth and where trust can be rewritten by machines." He paused, then added, "Today wasn't justice. It was correction." The crowd erupted not in cheers, but in applause that felt earned. As Keanu stepped back inside, he knew the hardest part wasn't over. Systems rarely forgive being revealed. But for the first time since that quiet morning in the market, his name belonged to him again. Keanu Reeves walked out of the federal building just after sunrise, when the city was still caught between night and day. The air was cool, carrying the distant sounds of traffic and the soft murmur of people gathered beyond the security barriers. Cameras waited. Of course they always did, but this time they felt smaller, less powerful. He paused at the top of the steps. For a moment, he simply stood there, hands at his sides, breathing in the ordinary miracle of freedom. No cuffs, no escorts gripping his arm. Just the quiet weight of having survived something designed to erase him. Applause rose from the crowd, not explosive, not hysterical, but steady and respectful. Keanu nodded once in acknowledgement, then descended the steps without ceremony. He didn't rush. He didn't perform. That, too, felt important. Later that day, he returned to the market. There were no announcements, no press releases to mark the moment. He came alone, dressed as he had been before, simple clothes, familiar jacket. The stalls were open again. Fruit gleamed in the morning light. Coffee steamed in paper cups. Life had reclaimed the space as if it had never been interrupted. A few people recognized him instantly. They froze, unsure whether to approach. Keanu smiled first, easing the distance. One by one, vendors nodded. A woman pressed her hand to her chest. The elderly coffee seller stared for a long second, then laughed softly and poured him a cup without being asked. "On the house," the man said. Keanu thanked him and stood where he had stood before, sipping slowly. The same street musician played nearby, the melody gentler now, carrying something hopeful beneath its notes. The world hadn't changed completely. Trust, once fractured, wouldn't heal overnight. The mirror network investigations would continue for years. Reports would be written. Reforms promised. Some names would be forgotten. Others would be protected. But something fundamental had shifted. Keanu understood now how fragile identity, truly, was in a world that could copy faces and rewrite voices. He understood how easily truth could be buried beneath convincing lies, and how vital it was to question even the most polished evidence. It felt heavier, but also sharper. If his name could be used as a shield for corruption, then reclaiming it meant more than clearing his record. It meant standing for something harder, less comfortable. He stopped at the bookstall again, fingers brushing along worn spines. This time, he chose a thin volume and paid in cash. When he left the market, the sun was fully up, casting long shadows behind him. The city moved on, as cities always do. But somewhere deep in its systems, a crack remained, a reminder that no mirror is flawless. Keanu walked forward, unguarded, unhidden, carrying with him a quiet certainty. Freedom wasn't just being released. It was knowing who you were when everything tried to tell you otherwise.